Hello everybody, I'm Rusty. I want to welcome you to Island Breeze Tropicals. So today we're going to be looking at another branch of the Bromeliad family tree, and we are going to look at the genus Dyckia. So you know what? The sun is shining, the island breeze is blowing. It's time that you and I got growing. Come on, let's have some fun. And why don't we take a look at this really interesting genus of bromeliads. So if this is your first time to the channel, welcome. It's great to have you with us. Do me a favor, if you like what you see, would you please hit that like button down there? And why don't you become a member of our Bromeliad family and become a subscriber? Thanks a lot. Now, let's get to today's video. So, Dyckias are a very, very unique bromeliad, not only in the way that they grow, but also in their architecture. There are about 120 species, and they hybridize readily, so you'll be able to find a bunch of hybrids out there. Now, they're native to Brazil, but also Paraguay, Uruguay, and also Bolivia, and they also can grow up to about 6,000 feet. Now, Dyckias are more terrestrial. They do not have a central tank like our tank type bromeliads have. And so they have adapted to grow in more arid environments. Now, that being said, they do not necessarily like drought, but they do grow in seasonally wet and seasonally dry environments. So, because they don't have a central tank like a lot of the bromeliads that we are all familiar with, they do have to have a larger root system. And so their root system does function to bring water into the plant. So as such, it's going to have a more extensive root system than we are used to in our tank type epiphytes. So what that means is that most are terrestrial. Some are saxicolous, which means that they grow attached to rocks, but most of these grow in some kind of soil where they are growing wild. So why don't we take a close-up of a couple, and I'm going to show you why they are so unique. Now, Dyckias can handle dry conditions, but they don't really like drought, and I'm going to show you right here in a close-up what that is going to look like if they get too dry. Dyckias can handle dryness fairly well, and Dyckias are seasonally wet and then seasonally dry, and they get over the dryness by going dormant. They do not store water in the leaves. I'm going to show you that. They are not succulents. They are bromeliads, but take a look, and right here you can see how these leaves have folded up on themselves. Well, that indicates that this particular plant got a little less water than what it really wanted. Now, during winter months, when they have stopped their active growing, then they can be watered a little bit less. Now, this shows the central rosette, and you can see, guys, that this does not have an ability to capture water, so their root system is the only way that Dyckias are going to get water. But take a look right here. If you take a look at that leaf and this one right back here, you can see that those leaves look a little dry, and so that's an indication that this particular clump, and it is a big clump, needed a little bit more water than what it got. Now you can see the size of the clump in this pot. I'd say this is probably about 7 or 8 inch terracotta pot. And oh, by the way, you can grow your Dyckias in terracotta. That's not a problem. We had an episode where I said it was probably the worst pot that you could use for your bromeliads. Well, there are exceptions to every rule. And with Dyckias, because they do need to have sharp draining mix. In other words, you can't put them in a mix that's going to stay soaking, sopping wet. You can compensate for that by putting them in terracotta. Now, this clump right here is really, really big, and honestly, this could be divided and put in smaller pots. Now, as you can see, dividing can be a chore. I mean, they are really tight in there, and I would wear gloves, but it can be done. This, by the way, is an unnamed hybrid. This is a Dyckia called Tarzana. It is a hybrid. You can see it's got a darker green, almost an olive color to it. By the way, all of these plants that I'm showing you are lent to me by my good friends at Sundance Orchids and Bromeliads in Fort Myers, Florida. So you can see that this particular hybrid does have an offset. And if you take a look at the offset, you can see that it's coming out of the base of the plant. But we'll come back to the unnamed hybrid and take a look that they also produce offsets out of the crown of the plant as well. And that is how they form these very, very large clumps and really don't go laterally or horizontally out so much as they want to clump. So this is another unnamed hybrid, and as you can see, they are really, really spiny. So my guess is that they evolved in an area where there were herbivores that would want to munch on them, and the spiny ones would stop that. Now you can see the pups coming off of the side, and this will start producing a nice clump at some point. Now, not only is it sending pups out, but take a look, it is also dividing at the top of the plant. It really does produce more offsets at the crown of the plant. So you can see that this, that this is not a huge Dyckia. And let's come on in here and take a look at the size of the arming on the leaf. But take a look at the way that the arming is arranged on this one particular plant here. But if you take a look, that I would say is pretty spiny. This is a Dyckia hybrid called Brazilian Ice, and as you can see, it's really, really silver. Now this is another Dyckia hybrid. As you can see, it's not very, very large. I'm guessing that that's going to be about as large as this gets, because you can see that it is producing offsets. And this is called Dyckia Black Ice. Now, you can see there's not a lot of black in that, and it needs a little bit more sun, perhaps, to get its color. Now, one other thing that marks them as being very, very different than our tank-type bromes is that Dyckias are not monocarpic. They do not get an inflorescence. I want to be careful where I stick my finger, don't I? They get their inflorescence not from the top of the plant and in the center, but out of the side. And so, as such, the Dyckia will not die immediately after blooming. So that does really set them apart than the bromeliads that we're used to. So, okay guys, why don't we do a brief recap on how to grow our Dyckias. Now let's start out first with water. They come from seasonally wet and seasonally dry areas. So these are not xeric plants. They're not like cacti and other succulents because they can't store water in their leaves. So their root system is their primary way of getting water, unlike our tank-type bromeliads. So you're going to want to put your Dyckias in pots that can accommodate that root system. Now, Dyckias can handle a certain amount of cold, even though you can't grow them if you have a long winter outside anyway. They make great potted plants, but they will tolerate some colder temperatures, even down into the 30s for very brief periods of time. Remember that they grow in the wild sometimes at elevation up to 6,000 feet. So they can tolerate brief periods of cold, unlike some of our tank-type bromeliads. Now, one thing that I didn't mention, most Dyckias are very, very tolerant of full sun conditions. So you can put these in some areas that you can't put our other bromeliads in full sun, and they will do quite well as long as they're well hydrated. So, okay guys, that's it. I hope you enjoyed looking at this really unique genus of bromeliads. Dyckias can be really fun to collect. They are so different, and they work really, really well as potted plants. And I'll bet you can find one or two for your collection. So no matter where you are, I hope your sun is shining. I hope you have an island breeze blowing. I know that you and I need to keep growing and have lots of fun. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.